When my 73rd birthday card from my daughter revealed the shocking message, "Thanks for the house, now leave," I realized the deed transfer I'd reluctantly signed during my recovery was never about my safety at all. It was a calculated plan to seize my home of 40 years. What my daughter hadn't counted on was that my career as a family law mediator had taught me exactly how to fight elder exploitation, or that Judge Eleanor Blackwell, who now presided over the county's Elder Protection Court, would immediately recognize the predatory pattern when I presented my meticulously documented timeline, ultimately leading to a resolution that restored not just my beloved home, but my sense of dignity and security in my golden years. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from today, and if this story resonates with you, make sure you're subscribed, because next week, I'm sharing crucial information about protecting your assets that everyone over 50 needs to hear. My name is Margaret Wilson, and at 73, I've learned that sometimes the deepest wounds come from those we've sacrificed the most to nurture. For 38 years, I served as a family law mediator at Pinecrest Family Services, where I became known for my ability to navigate complex emotional disputes while protecting vulnerable parties. I specialized in cases where financial pressures created power imbalances in relationships, particularly among older adults. This expertise would become painfully relevant in my own life. I purchased my Craftsman bungalow on Maple Ridge Drive in 1982, shortly after divorcing Edward, when our daughter Christine was 11. The modest three-bedroom home with its welcoming front porch and garden full of heirloom roses became our sanctuary during difficult years. It represented stability for Christine and a fresh start for me as I built my mediation practice. This wasn't just a house, it was the physical embodiment of our new beginning. I'd restored the original hardwood floors myself, spending weekends sanding and refinishing while Christine helped select the perfect honey stain. The built-in bookshelves displayed not only my professional references, but also the nature collections from our weekend walks. My kitchen, with its vintage blue tile countertops, hosted countless healing dinners, where friends going through their own divorces found community around my table. After Christine left for college, I deepened my mediation practice, eventually focusing on elder family disputes. My approach centered on preserving senior autonomy while addressing legitimate family concerns, balancing safety needs with the fundamental right to self-determination that I firmly believed shouldn't diminish with age. Christine earned her psychology degree and then a master's in counseling, a path I supported both emotionally and financially. When she married Daniel, a commercial real estate developer in her early 30s, I welcomed him despite noticing his materialistic focus. Their lives settled in Lakewood Heights, an affluent suburb 40 minutes away. Our connection remained, steady though not as close as I might have wished. Sunday dinners became monthly events. Phone calls grew briefer and more logistical than heartfelt. I attributed these natural shifts to their busy lives and their teenagers, Madison and Tyler. The first warning signs appeared 3 years ago during a family dinner. Christine and Daniel arrived with a glossy brochure for Sunshine Valley Retirement Village, which they presented with surprising enthusiasm over dessert. "Mom, we toured this place last weekend and thought of you immediately," Christine explained, displaying photographs of modern apartments and community spaces. "They have everything: fitness center, social activities, medical staff on site. And it's only 15 minutes from our neighborhood." "That's thoughtful, but I'm perfectly happy here," I responded, puzzled by their excitement over an unnecessary change. At 70, I'm still fully capable of maintaining my property. Daniel leaned forward, his sales demeanor activating. "Margaret, it's not about capability right now. It's about planning ahead responsibly. Property values in your neighborhood have skyrocketed. You could sell for at least double what you paid, invest that equity properly, and eliminate future maintenance concerns." His framing of my beloved home as primarily a financial asset revealed our fundamental disconnect. More concerning was the assumption that at 70, I should already be withdrawing from independent living despite my excellent health and active part-time practice. I appreciate your thinking of me, I said carefully. But I have no intention of selling. This is where I feel most connected to my community. When I need additional support, I'll explore options then. Christine seemed ready to press further, but Daniel placed a restraining hand on her arm, a gesture I recognized from countless mediation sessions as signaling a strategic retreat rather than acceptance. Of course, Mom. It's entirely your decision. We just wanted you to know about this opportunity. Over the following months, casual conversations increasingly referenced friends' parents who had made the smart move while they still had choices, or news items about elderly individuals facing costly home repairs. Each comment contained subtle messaging about the supposed impracticality of aging in place. The Hendersons just sold their mother's house for an amazing price, Christine mentioned during one call. She's so much happier without all those responsibilities, and they invested the proceeds to provide additional income for her care. I'm happy for Mrs. Henderson, I would respond. Everyone's circumstances and preferences are different. These exchanges established a concerning pattern: persistent pressure framed as caring concern, financial arguments presented as practical wisdom, and my preferences implicitly characterized as stubborn attachment. My professional experience helped me recognize these tactics, though I struggled to accept their emergence in my relationship with Christine. What I didn't fully appreciate were the financial pressures developing in Christine and Daniel's lives. Through casual mentions, I pieced together a troubling picture. Daniel's real estate developments had suffered setbacks during the market downturn. Their mortgage on an oversized home stretched their budget, and private school tuition for both children created additional strain. These circumstances didn't justify their increasing pressure regarding my living arrangements, but they provided context for their sudden interest in my home's equity being put to better use. Everything changed. Last February, while volunteering at the community garden, I experienced what my doctor later described as a minor cardiac event. Though not a full heart attack, it required overnight hospital observation and prompted recommendations for stress reduction and medication adjustments. Christine arrived at the hospital displaying what initially seemed like appropriate concern. "Mom, this is exactly why we've been worried about you living alone," she said, sitting beside my bed with Daniel hovering near the doorway. "If this had happened at home at night, who would have called for help?" "I have my medical alert system and neighbors who check in regularly," I reminded her. "And this was minor. It's now controlled with medication." Christine exchanged a glance with Daniel before continuing. "We've been researching options that might provide better security while respecting your independence. What would you think about adding me to your home's deed? It would be a safety precaution that would make certain legal matters simpler if you needed assistance, while allowing you to continue living exactly as you are." The request triggered immediate warning signals. In my practice, I had encountered numerous cases where adding adult children to property deeds created problematic power imbalances and sometimes led to pressure for premature sales. However, Christine presented this as a minor administrative adjustment rather than the significant legal change it represented. "I have proper advance directives and powers of attorney already established," I explained, referencing the comprehensive legal planning I had completed with my colleague Barbara Stevenson, an elder law specialist. "Those documents provide appropriate protections while maintaining clear boundaries." "Those can be cumbersome in emergencies," Daniel interjected. "Adding Christine to the deed creates immediate clarity about authority that could be crucial during a health crisis." Their persistence, particularly while I was vulnerable, concerned me deeply. Yet I also recognized the genuine worry beneath their problematic approach, the universal fear adult children experience when confronting parental mortality. "Let me think about this once I'm home and feeling stronger," I suggested, needing time to consult with Barbara. This isn't a decision to make from a hospital bed. This deferral seemed to satisfy them temporarily, though Christine's parting comment, "We just want what's best for you, Mom," carried undertones of the patronizing approach I had often helped elderly clients resist. Once home, I scheduled a consultation with Barbara, who confirmed my concerns. This would give her equal ownership interest in your property with no legal obligation to honor your wishes regarding its retention, she warned. I've seen many cases where such arrangements led to pressure for sale or even forced displacement when family financial needs created conflicts of interest. Despite this clear professional advice, Christine's persistent references to my close call and the dangers of living alone created emotional pressure that was difficult to resist. After several weeks of what felt like constant discussion, I reluctantly agreed to a compromise, adding Christine to the deed with a written side agreement specifying that this arrangement was for emergency management only and did not reflect any intention to sell the property during my lifetime. Barbara drafted this agreement, clearly stating, "This deed modification is made solely for administrative convenience during potential health emergencies and does not authorize property sale or Margaret Wilson's displacement from her residence without her explicit written consent." Both Christine and I signed this document, which Barbara notarized and retained in her files. For several months afterward, the pressure subsided. Our relationship seemed to normalize, with regular calls and monthly family dinners. Christine occasionally mentioned maintenance issues at my home, suggesting professional services for tasks I had previously handled myself. But these recommendations seemed genuinely motivated by concern rather than hidden agenda. Then came my 73rd birthday in September. Christine arranged a small celebration at my home, with close friends and neighbors joining for cake and coffee in my garden. The afternoon seemed pleasant, with Christine attentive and engaged in conversations about my community activities and part-time work. As guests departed, Christine presented me with a birthday card in a pale blue envelope. "A special message from us," she said, gesturing to include Daniel and the children. Her expression held something I couldn't quite interpret, tension around her eyes suggesting nervousness beneath the celebration facade. Alone in my kitchen, that evening, I opened the envelope to find artistic flowers on the front and pre-printed birthday wishes inside. Below these generic sentiments, Christine had written in her familiar handwriting, "Thanks for the house. Now leave. We found a perfect apartment for you at Sunshine Valley. Daniel will help with moving arrangements next weekend." The shock of these words temporarily paralyzed me. This wasn't a request or even firm persuasion. It was an announcement of decisions made without my input or consent, delivered through the particularly cruel mechanism of a birthday card. When I called, Christine immediately, her response revealed the strategy behind this approach. "Mom, we've already put down the deposit on the apartment. The house needs significant updates before we can list it in the spring market, so timing is crucial. You'll be so much happier without these responsibilities, and the proceeds will ensure you're financially secure." "This is my home," I responded, struggling to maintain composure. "Adding you to the deed was for emergency purposes only, as our signed agreement clearly states. I have no intention of moving or selling." "That agreement isn't legally binding on the property itself," Daniel's voice interjected, indicating I was on speakerphone. "As co-owner, Christine has equal right to request property liquidation. We're trying to make this transition smooth, but we're prepared to pursue partition action if necessary." The calculated nature of this maneuver became clear. They had consulted with legal counsel about overriding our written agreement, determined that co-ownership created leverage despite our documented intentions, and deliberately waited until after the deed modification was completed to reveal their actual agenda. "I need to consider my options," I said finally, recognizing the futility of emotional appeals. "I'll be speaking with my attorney tomorrow." "Please don't make this adversarial, Mom," Christine responded, her tone suggesting I was being unreasonable, rather than defending against their extraordinary overreach. "We're only thinking about your long-term security." After ending the call, I sat in my kitchen, the very space where I had comforted Christine through teenage heartbreaks. where we had celebrated her college acceptance, where I had hosted her bridal shower and confronted the profound betrayal these actions represented. Beyond the property issues lay the deeper wound of a daughter viewing my home as a financial asset to be liquidated against my wishes, my autonomy as an inconvenient obstacle to her plans, and my attachment to my carefully created environment as irrelevant sentimentality. That evening, as shock yielded to strategic thinking, I recognized that my decades of professional experience had uniquely prepared me for this painful battle. The expertise I had developed protecting others would now serve in my own defense against the very tactics I had spent a career helping vulnerable elders resist. With determination, I called Barbara Stevenson. "I need your help," I explained, summarizing the birthday card ambush and subsequent conversation. "They're planning to force the sale of my home despite our written agreement." Barbara's response was immediate and resolute. "Document everything. The card, any text messages, the timing of events. I'll contact Judge Blackwell about emergency injunctive options under the elder protection statutes." This is precisely the scenario those provisions were designed to address. As I prepared for bed that night in the home I had lovingly maintained for over 40 years, I felt something shift within me, grief transforming into determination, shock hardening into resolve. The mediation skills I had used throughout my career to find balanced solutions would still be valuable, but this situation had moved beyond compromise into territory requiring firm legal boundaries. My daughter had miscalculated significantly, in believing that age had diminished either my capacity or my determination to maintain autonomy over my most important decisions. The birthday card intended to announce my displacement would instead become Exhibit A in a case demonstrating undue influence and potential exploitation, a case I was uniquely qualified to help build based on decades of professional experience, with precisely these dynamics. The painful irony wasn't lost on me. After years helping families navigate transitions with respect and balance, I now faced a battle against my own daughter's attempt to override my clearly expressed wishes. Yet within this painful reality lay an important opportunity to demonstrate through personal example the principles I had always advocated. That age doesn't diminish the right to self-determination, that proper support honors autonomy rather than overriding it, and that respecting an elder's preferences sometimes requires accepting decisions different from those we might make ourselves. With these thoughts clarifying my path forward, I began mentally preparing for the challenging days ahead, gathering evidence, consulting specialists, and mobilizing the professional network I had built throughout my career. Christine and Daniel believed they were dealing with a vulnerable, elderly woman who would acquiesce to pressure rather than fight for her rights. They were about to discover how profoundly they had underestimated the mediator, whose professional legacy included protecting countless elder clients from precisely the tactics they had chosen to employ against me. Part 2, Building the Case. The morning after receiving the devastating birthday card, I awoke with renewed clarity and determination. Years of professional experience had taught me that emotional reactions, while natural and valid, rarely produce effective outcomes in property disputes. As I prepared for my first meeting with Barbara Stevenson, I methodically gathered materials that would form the foundation of my case: the birthday card itself, preserved in its envelope, the notarized agreement specifying the limited purpose of the deed modification, medical records documenting my cognitive clarity despite the minor cardiac event, and a journal I had maintained documenting Christine and Daniel's escalating pressure regarding my living arrangements. Barbara's office, located in a converted Victorian near the courthouse, had always represented a sanctuary of legal protection for vulnerable clients. Now sitting across from her desk as a client rather than professional colleague, I experienced firsthand the reassurance her calm competence provided during crisis. "We need to move quickly," Barbara advised after reviewing my documentation. The written agreement, while not binding on the property itself, as Daniel correctly noted, provides crucial evidence of potential undue influence and misrepresentation during the deed transfer. But timing is essential. Once they initiate formal partition proceedings, our options become more limited. "What's our best approach?" I asked, deliberately adopting the professional tone that had served me through decades of complex negotiations, rather than succumbing to the maternal heartbreak simmering beneath my composed exterior. "Two-pronged strategy," Barbara replied, her efficient assessment reflecting our years of professional collaboration. "First, emergency injunction under the Elder Protection Statutes to prevent any property listing or further action regarding the home. Second, petition to invalidate the deed transfer based on misrepresentation of purpose and evidence of a pre-existing plan to force sale contrary to the documented agreement." She pulled a legal pad forward, making quick notes as she outlined next steps. "Judge Eleanor Blackwell is currently presiding over the elder protection calendar. Given your history working together on the family court mediation program, she'll likely recuse herself from directly hearing your case, but her procedural rulings on emergency matters before reassignment would be invaluable." The mention of Eleanor, who had begun as my student in the court mediation training program 20 years earlier before her impressive rise to judicial appointment, reminded me of the professional network I had built throughout my career. This network, cultivated through decades of ethical practice and collaborative problem-solving, represented a resource Christine had clearly underestimated when calculating her leverage in this situation. "I can have the emergency petition filed by tomorrow morning," Barbara continued, "but we'll need comprehensive documentation of your current cognitive capacity and independent functioning to counter any claims they might make about safety concerns justifying their actions." This recommendation highlighted another troubling aspect of elder financial disputes I had encountered professionally: the tendency for property disputes to transform into competency challenges when financial interests collided with elder autonomy. Though my cognitive capacity remained unquestionably intact, I understood the tactical advantage of proactively addressing potential arguments Christine might raise to justify overriding my wishes. "I'll schedule appointments with Dr. Matthews for updated cognitive assessment, and with Sarah Jenkins for a home safety evaluation," I decided, referring to the geriatric specialist who had performed my routine checkups for years and the occupational therapist who specialized in aging-in-place assessments for the County Elder Services Program. "Perfect," Barbara nodded approvingly. "Independent documentation of both cognitive capacity and appropriate home environment will strengthen our position significantly. Also, we should consider a formal property appraisal to establish current market value. I suspect Daniel's real estate background has given them specific targets for potential profit that may be motivating this sudden urgency." As I left Barbara's office with a clear action plan, I experienced the paradoxical emotions familiar from my professional practice: the grief of family betrayal counterbalanced by the empowerment of strategic response. The birthday card that had delivered such devastating message now served as crucial evidence, transforming Christine's cruelty into legal vulnerability through its documentation of exploitative intent. Over the next 72 hours, I moved through necessary preparations with efficiency honed through decades of professional crisis management. Dr. Matthews conducted comprehensive cognitive evaluation, documenting exceptional executive function and decision-making capacity consistent with lifelong high functioning, with no evidence of cognitive impairment affecting financial or personal decision-making. Sarah's home safety assessment noted minor modification recommendations: grab bars in the bathroom, improved exterior lighting, but concluded, "This home environment presents no significant safety concerns for a person of Ms. Wilson's current physical capabilities, particularly given appropriate supports already in place such as the medical alert system and established neighbor check-in protocols." Most revealing was the property appraisal Barbara arranged through Harrison Realty, which valued my modest bungalow at $685,000, significantly higher than I had realized given the neighborhood's recent desirability among young professionals seeking character homes in established communities. This valuation cast Christine and Daniel's sudden urgency in particularly troubling light, suggesting financial motivations far exceeding legitimate concerns about my welfare. Meanwhile, Barbara had successfully obtained emergency hearing with Judge Blackwell, scheduled for Thursday morning, just 5 days after the birthday card's delivery, and, notably, 2 days before the moving arrangements Christine and Daniel had unilaterally planned. Though Eleanor would ultimately recuse herself from the full proceedings given our professional history, her willingness to hear initial emergency matters reflected the seriousness with which the court viewed potential elder exploitation cases. The morning of the hearing, I dressed with deliberate care in the navy suit and pearl earrings that had been my professional uniform throughout my mediation career. Though I had transitioned to semi-retirement and more casual attire years earlier, this formal presentation served important strategic purpose, visually reinforcing my continued competence and professional identity against any potential characterization as diminished or dependent. Barbara met me at the courthouse entrance, her expression conveying both personal support and professional determination. "Christine and Daniel have retained Philip Morgan," she noted as we walked toward the courtroom. "Aggressive advocate, specializes in family property disputes. His presence suggests they're prepared for significant legal battle rather than expecting easy capitulation." This information, while concerning, wasn't surprising. During my professional career, I had encountered Philip in numerous mediations, a technically skilled attorney whose approach often prioritized aggressive leverage over collaborative resolution. His involvement confirmed my suspicion that Christine and Daniel had planned this strategy well in advance of the birthday card revelation, securing legal representation prepared for contentious proceedings. The courtroom was largely empty when we entered, typical for emergency calendar hearings that occurred before regular court sessions began. Christine and Daniel sat at the respondents' table, both dressed in formal business attire that seemed calculated to project responsible authority, rather than the exploitative opportunism their actions represented. Christine's gaze flickered toward me briefly before focusing deliberately on the papers before her, while Daniel leaned toward Philip, engaged in whispered consultation that suggested last-minute strategy adjustments. Judge Eleanor Blackwell entered promptly at 8:30, her judicial robes and composed demeanor masking the warmth I knew from our years of professional collaboration. After calling the emergency session to order, she addressed the procedural matters directly. "Given my prior professional relationship with the petitioner, I will be handling only today's emergency injunction request before reassigning the case for full hearing before Judge Martinez," she explained, referring to her colleague who specialized in elder law matters. "This limited intervention is appropriate given the time-sensitive nature of the petitioner's concerns regarding imminent property actions." Eleanor's careful establishment of procedural propriety reflected her characteristic attention to both legal ethics and practical necessity, addressing potential conflict of interest while recognizing the urgent timing considerations that made immediate action necessary. After confirming both parties were properly represented, she invited Barbara to present our emergency petition. Barbara rose with the measured confidence that had made her one of the county's most respected elder law specialists. "Your Honor, this petition seeks emergency injunctive relief preventing any property actions regarding the residence at 1847 Maple Ridge Drive, pending full hearing on petition to invalidate deed transfer obtained under documented misrepresentation of purpose." She proceeded to outline the key elements of our position: the documented health event that created vulnerability, the repeated refusals to consider selling prior to that vulnerability, the written agreement explicitly limiting the purpose of the deed transfer, and finally, the birthday card that revealed the actual intent to force displacement against my clearly expressed wishes. When Barbara presented the actual birthday card as evidence, reading aloud the handwritten "Thanks for the house now leave" message, I noticed Eleanor's brief expression of surprise before her judicial composure returned. The calculated cruelty of delivering such message through birthday greeting apparently struck her as it had me. An unnecessary emotional injury added to the already troubling property actions. Philip Morgan's response focused on legal technicalities, rather than addressing the ethical substance of our arguments. While the timing and communication methods might seem insensitive, the legal reality remains straightforward, he argued with professional detachment. Ms. Sullivan willingly transferred partial ownership interest to her daughter, creating joint tenancy with equal rights to property disposition. Any side agreements regarding intended purpose, while perhaps emotionally significant, do not alter the fundamental legal rights established by the deed transfer itself. He continued with practiced confidence. Furthermore, the respondents have legitimate concerns about their mother's safety and financial security that motivated these difficult but necessary decisions. The recent cardiac event demonstrates precisely the type of health vulnerability that makes independent living increasingly impractical at advanced age. This patronizing characterization of my advanced age as inherently incompatible with independent decision-making represented precisely the ageist assumptions I had fought throughout my professional career. The presumption that chronological age somehow diminished capacity for self-determination regardless of individual circumstance or demonstrated capability, though I maintained composed exterior appropriate to court proceedings. Internally, I noted the strategic weakness this argument revealed. Their position relied on generalized stereotypes, rather than specific evidence relevant to my particular situation. Judge Blackwell's questioning focused on the timing and documentation issues that formed the core of our petition. Mr. Morgan, when precisely did your clients begin planning the senior living arrangements referenced in their communication to the petitioner? Philip hesitated momentarily. The type of telling pause I had observed countless times in mediation when advocates encountered unexpected inquiry that threatened prepared narrative. I believe those discussions began after Ms. Wilson's health incident in February, Your Honor, as part of responsible contingency planning. Eleanor's follow-up was immediate and precise. And the deposit mentioned in their communication, when exactly was that payment made to Sunshine Valley Retirement Community? Another hesitation. I don't have the exact date available, Your Honor. I see, Eleanor noted, making brief notation before continuing. And regarding the written agreement limiting the purpose of the deed transfer, are your clients disputing the existence of this document, or merely its legal enforceability regarding the property interests? The latter, Your Honor, Philip acknowledged. While such document exists, it doesn't alter the legal rights established through proper deed transfer regardless of discussions surrounding that transfer. These exchanges, though seemingly procedural, revealed the weakness in Christine and Daniel's position. The documented timeline undermined their claims of protective motivation, suggesting instead a calculated strategy to obtain property control, under false pretenses before revealing actual intentions once legal leverage was secured. After brief final arguments from both attorneys, Judge Blackwell announced her ruling on the emergency petition with characteristic efficiency. Having reviewed the petition and supporting documentation, I find sufficient evidence of potential misrepresentation and undue influence to warrant emergency injunctive relief pending full hearing on the underlying petition to invalidate the deed transfer. She continued with specific terms. Until further order from the court, respondents are prohibited from listing the property for sale, interfering with petitioner's residence at the property, or making any disposition decisions regarding the property at 1847 Maple Ridge Drive. Additionally, all parties are ordered to maintain status quo regarding living arrangements and property condition pending resolution of the underlying petition. This ruling, while preliminary, represented crucial first victory, preventing the forced move Christine and Daniel had planned for the coming weekend, while establishing foundation for the more comprehensive legal challenge to the deed transfer itself. As court adjourned with instructions for case transfer to Judge Martinez for full hearing scheduled 3 weeks later, I maintained the composed demeanor expected in formal proceedings, despite the significant emotional victory this represented. Outside the courtroom, Christine approached with Daniel hovering protectively nearby, her expression combining indignation with what appeared to be genuine surprise at the proceeding's outcome. "Mom, I can't believe you're putting us all through this public spectacle," she said, voice lowered but intensity unmistakable. "We were only trying to ensure your future security before another health crisis created emergency situation. This legal approach is completely unnecessary." The familiar pattern of her framing, recasting their actions as benevolent protection rather than calculated exploitation, reflected tactics I had observed repeatedly in professional practice. Adult children, when challenged regarding questionable financial actions, often retreated to protection narratives that positioned the elder as ungrateful or unreasonable rather than acknowledging the autonomy violations their actions represented. "Christine, I made my wishes regarding my home absolutely clear, both before and after my minor health incident," I responded with the calm clarity I had employed throughout my mediation career. "The birthday card message revealed your actual intentions in obtaining property interest under false pretenses. If you had genuinely believed your actions were appropriate, you wouldn't have needed to misrepresent your purpose during the deed transfer discussions." Daniel stepped forward, his professional demeanor slipping to reveal the frustration beneath. "This property is worth nearly $700,000, sitting there underutilized while you stubbornly cling to unnecessary space. That equity could be generating significant returns if properly invested, securing your future care while addressing pressing family financial needs." This unguarded comment, revealing the family financial motivations Barbara had suspected, provided unexpected confirmation of the actual priorities driving their actions. Far from the protective concerns they had claimed, Daniel's statement explicitly prioritized property value and potential investment returns over my clearly expressed wishes regarding my home and independence. "My home is not an investment property, awaiting more productive deployment, Daniel," I replied, maintaining composed tone despite his evident agitation. "It's where I've chosen to live, in a community where I have meaningful connections and support systems. Your assessment of its utility or financial optimization potential isn't relevant to my decision-making authority regarding my own residence." Before further exchange could occur, Barbara intervened with professional courtesy that nevertheless established clear boundaries. "All communication regarding this matter should proceed through counsel moving forward," she advised, gently guiding me toward the courthouse exit. "We'll be in touch regarding discovery requests and deposition scheduling." As we departed, I glimpsed Christine's expression, a complex mixture of anger, calculation, and what appeared to be genuine confusion regarding my resistance to their plans. This confusion perhaps most clearly illustrated the fundamental disconnect at the heart of our conflict, her inability to recognize that my autonomy and self-determination held value beyond financial considerations or theoretical safety concerns. The following days brought expected legal maneuvers as both sides prepared for the full hearing. Philip submitted formal response to our petition, focusing on technical arguments regarding deed validity regardless of surrounding discussions, while introducing peripheral concerns about my safety living alone that seemed calculated to justify their actions through protective framing rather than acknowledging the property interests clearly driving their decisions. Barbara's strategic response focused on comprehensive documentation of both my capacity and the appropriateness of my living situation, directly addressing the safety concerns while building compelling evidence of misrepresentation during the deed transfer process. The geriatric assessment from Dr. Matthews, home safety evaluation from Sarah Jenkins, and statements from neighbors regarding their regular check-in protocols created substantial counterweight to the generalized age-based concerns Christine and Daniel's counsel had raised. Perhaps most significantly, Barbara's discovery requests uncovered communications between Christine and Sunshine Valley Retirement Community dating back to January, nearly a month before my cardiac incident, inquiring about availability and pricing for one-bedroom units. This timeline directly contradicted their claim that retirement community arrangements had developed as protective response to my February health event, suggesting instead that plans for my displacement had been underway before the vulnerability that supposedly prompted their concern. Additional financial discovery revealed concerning context for Daniel's urgency regarding my property. His real estate development company had recently experienced significant losses on a commercial project, resulting in substantial personal debt secured against their primary residence. This financial pressure explained their sudden focus on unlocking my home's equity despite my clear wishes to age in place, revealing motivations far different from the protective concern they had repeatedly claimed. As these discoveries accumulated, I maintained daily routines that both provided emotional stability during legal uncertainty and demonstrated my continued capacity for independent living. The community garden where I volunteered 3 mornings weekly became particular sanctuary. The physical activity of tending growing things, offering both stress relief and tangible evidence of ongoing capability. Fellow gardeners, many themselves, seniors aging independently, provided subtle but meaningful support, their matter-of-fact acceptance of my continued competence contrasting sharply with the diminished capacity Christine and Daniel's legal arguments implied. 2 weeks after the emergency hearing, Barbara arranged settlement conference, suggesting that the mounting evidence might motivate Christine and Daniel toward resolution that avoided potentially damaging public findings regarding their actions. The conference, held in Barbara's office, with all parties and counsel present, provided opportunity for direct confrontation of the factual timeline their legal arguments had attempted to obscure. The documented communications with Sunshine Valley from January, predating Ms. Wilson's health incident by several weeks, create significant credibility issues regarding your client's claimed motivations, Barbara noted with professional directness. Combined with Mr. Sullivan's recently revealed financial difficulties, these facts suggest financial opportunism rather than protective concern as the primary motivation for these actions. Philip attempted to maintain their protective narrative, despite the timeline inconsistencies. Regardless of when preliminary inquiries began, the health incident confirmed the wisdom of proactive planning for appropriate senior living arrangements. Many adult children anticipate their parents' eventual needs before specific health events make those needs immediately apparent. The fundamental issue remains Ms. Wilson's clearly documented wishes regarding her residence, Barbara countered, firmly. Anticipating potential needs is entirely appropriate. Disguising property acquisition strategies as safety measures to override expressed preferences is not. The written agreement explicitly limiting the deed transfer purpose creates compelling evidence of misrepresentation during that process. Throughout this exchange, I observed Christine's physical reactions, the slight flushing of her neck, the increasingly tense posture, the darting glances toward Daniel that suggested mounting anxiety about their position. These subtle cues, which I had learned to recognize through decades of mediation practice, indicated potential openness to settlement despite her maintained facade of righteous indignation. After nearly 2 hours of discussion, Philip requested private consultation with his clients, returning with preliminary settlement terms that suggested recognition of their weakened position. Voluntary removal of Christine from the deed. Formal acknowledgement that my home would remain my primary residence without interference, and establishment of transparent communication protocols for any legitimate health or safety concerns moving forward. While these terms addressed the immediate property issues, they conspicuously omitted any acknowledgement of wrongdoing or exploitative intent behind their actions. This absence reflected common pattern in elder exploitation cases: willingness to reverse practical outcomes when legally cornered while maintaining narrative of benevolent motivation, rather than acknowledging the fundamental autonomy violation at the core of such actions. These proposed terms address the property restoration, but not the breach of trust that necessitated legal intervention, I noted after reviewing their offer. Without acknowledgement of deliberately misleading representations, during the deed transfer process, there's no foundation for rebuilding any relationship moving forward. This observation, framing accountability as prerequisite for potential relationship repair rather than purely legal matter, reflected my professional understanding that meaningful resolution required addressing underlying dynamics rather than merely reversing practical outcomes. Without recognition of the autonomy violation their actions represented, any resolution would remain superficial and vulnerable to future recurrence when financial pressures again collided with my independence. Barbara supported this position, with legal framework that connected emotional and practical concerns. In addition to deed restoration, we would require formal stipulation acknowledging the binding nature of the written limitations agreement and confirming that the deed transfer was obtained through misrepresentation of purpose. Without such acknowledgement, we'd proceed to full hearing where these findings would likely be established through judicial determination rather than voluntary admission. This approach, offering choice between private acknowledgement through settlement versus public findings through court proceedings, created strategic leverage that addressed both practical and emotional aspects of resolution. Their counsel immediately recognized the significance of this distinction, requesting additional time to consult privately with his clients regarding these expanded terms. The settlement discussions continued for several more hours, with multiple private consultations and redrafted proposals exchanged between the conference room and adjacent offices. By late afternoon, we had reached tentative agreement that included the core elements I had insisted upon: complete removal of Christine from the deed, formal acknowledgement that the transfer had been obtained through misrepresentation of purpose, specific prohibitions against any future interference with my residence decisions, and their agreement to participate in family counseling, addressing the trust violations underlying this conflict. This last element, requiring engagement with the emotional and relationship damage rather than merely resolving legal technicalities, represented particularly important victory from my perspective. Throughout my professional career, I had witnessed countless families where unaddressed trust violations created permanent estrangement despite technical resolution of triggering disputes. While rebuilding trust with Christine would require substantial time and evidence of genuine value change, the counseling requirement at least established structured process for beginning that challenging work rather than allowing unacknowledged betrayal to permanently sever family bonds. As I returned home that evening to the bungalow I had fought to protect, I experienced complex emotions familiar from my professional practice, yet more intense in personal application. Satisfaction, regarding the practical victory combined with profound grief for the relationship damage that had necessitated legal battle against my own daughter. The garden roses Thomas had planted decades earlier, now blooming in late-season display along the front walkway, provided poignant reminder of how homes contain not merely financial value, but irreplaceable emotional significance woven through decades of life experience. Sitting on my front porch as evening settled over the quiet street, I reflected on the professional expertise that had proven unexpectedly crucial in personal crisis. The mediation skills developed through decades of practice had provided not only practical strategies for this difficult conflict, but also emotional framework for processing betrayal without allowing bitterness to overshadow potential healing. The legal knowledge accumulated through professional collaboration had enabled recognition of exploitation tactics I might otherwise have mistaken for genuine concern, while my professional network had provided crucial support when vulnerability might otherwise have forced capitulation. Most significantly, my career defending elder autonomy had developed unshakable conviction regarding fundamental principles now personally validated: that aging doesn't diminish right to self-determination, that vulnerability requires protection without imposing unnecessary dependence, and that respecting elders means honoring their expressed wishes rather than imposing others' financial calculations or convenience considerations. These principles, previously advocated professionally, had now been personally defended through difficult but necessary stand against exploitation, wrapped in familial concern. The birthday card that had delivered such devastating message now rested in Barbara's evidence file, transformed from instrument of cruel dismissal into documented proof of exploitative intent that had ultimately strengthened rather than diminished my position. While Christine had clearly anticipated my shocked acquiescence to their demands, the card had instead catalyzed resistance informed by decades of professional experience with precisely these dynamics. As darkness fell over my garden, I found unexpected peace in this uncertain resolution. Property rights secured but relationship damage requiring lengthy healing process with uncertain outcome. Whatever relationship might eventually develop with Christine, the fundamental principle had been clearly established. My home remained mine to occupy according to my own choices, my autonomy protected against financial opportunism disguised. As protective concern, my boundaries enforced through necessary legal intervention when voluntary respect proved insufficient. After decades helping others navigate similar conflicts, I had successfully applied that professional wisdom to my own painful circumstance, maintaining balanced perspective that neither minimized betrayal nor closed possibility of eventual relationship repair through genuine accountability and demonstrated value change. The mediator who had guided countless families through complex transitions had ultimately mediated her own most challenging case, balancing advocacy and potential reconciliation in the painful aftermath of exploitation by those who should have been most protective. 3 months after the settlement agreement, I sat in Dr. Evelyn Parker's office for our 4th family counseling session. The modern therapeutic space with its neutral tones and comfortable seating had become the structured environment where Christine and I attempted to navigate the damaged landscape of our relationship. Daniel had attended only the initial session, his obvious discomfort with the emotional excavation process leading to mutual agreement that the mother-daughter dynamics should be addressed first before potentially including him in later sessions. Margaret, could you share your thoughts on Christine's comments from our last session? Dr. Parker prompted. Her professional demeanor balanced with genuine warmth that had made these difficult conversations possible. I considered carefully before responding, conscious of the delicate balance between honest expression and productive engagement. I appreciate Christine's acknowledgement that the approach taken regarding my home was fundamentally disrespectful of my autonomy, I began. That recognition is an important foundational step. However, I'm still struggling with the focus on good intentions as justification rather than addressing the deliberate misrepresentation involved in obtaining the deed transfer. Christine shifted uncomfortably in her seat, the defensive posture I recognized from countless mediations. Shoulders slightly raised, arms crossed, gaze directed slightly downward rather than maintaining eye contact. I've said repeatedly that, "I'm sorry for how everything happened," she responded, tension evident in her voice. "But it feels like nothing I say is enough. You keep returning to the same points about deliberate misrepresentation when we were genuinely concerned about your welfare after the heart incident." This pattern had characterized our sessions thus far. Christine's persistent framing of their actions as well-intentioned despite mounting evidence to the contrary, contrasted with my insistence on acknowledging the calculated nature of their approach. The fundamental disconnect wasn't about apology language but about honest recognition of what had actually occurred. "Christine," Dr. Parker interjected gently, "your mother has acknowledged your expressed concern for her welfare. The difficulty appears to center on the timeline discrepancy. The documented communications with Sunshine Valley predating her health incident, and the deliberate concealment of those plans while requesting the deed transfer for supposedly different purposes." This careful redirection illustrated why I had selected Dr. Parker for this difficult process. Her therapeutic approach balanced compassionate understanding with unflinching accountability, refusing to allow either emotional manipulation or convenient narrative revisions to substitute for genuine reconciliation work. Christine was silent for several moments, her expression suggesting internal struggle that I recognized from childhood moments when she'd been caught in clear misrepresentation, but remained reluctant to fully acknowledge wrongdoing. Finally, she spoke with hesitant cadence, unlike her usual confident delivery. The initial inquiries with Sunshine Valley weren't specifically about moving you immediately, she admitted. They were exploring options given Daniel's financial situation. The property values in your neighborhood had increased significantly, and we were discussing various possibilities for addressing our financial challenges. This admission, however reluctant, represented significant breakthrough in our process, acknowledging for the first time that financial motivations had preceded safety concerns rather than following from them. The careful distinction she attempted to maintain between exploring options and concrete planning still minimized the calculated nature of their actions, but the core acknowledgement of financial motivation represented an important step toward honest accounting. When your heart situation happened, she continued, it seemed like perfect timing to implement what we'd been considering, addressing both your safety and our financial needs simultaneously. I convinced myself that because the living community was genuinely nice, it wasn't really dishonest to frame it as primarily about your welfare when approaching you about the deed. Dr. Parker allowed brief silence following this statement, creating space for its significance to register before asking, Margaret, what are you hearing in Christine's comments today? I measured my response carefully, recognizing both the progress this acknowledgement represented and its remaining limitations. I hear Christine acknowledging for the first time that financial considerations were the primary motivation, with my welfare concerns added afterward to justify actions already contemplated, for different reasons. That honesty is an important step forward from the previous narrative that everything developed as protective response to my health. Christine nodded slightly, though tension remained evident in her posture. What remains unaddressed, I continued, is recognition of the fundamental disrespect inherent in believing you are entitled to make housing decisions on my behalf, contrary to my clearly expressed wishes. The acknowledgement of financial motivation explains the why, but doesn't address the underlying assumption that my preferences could be overridden when inconvenient to your plans. This observation, focusing on the autonomy violation rather than merely the misrepresentation, reflected the core issue that would require addressing for meaningful relationship repair. Throughout my professional career, I had observed how adult children often framed elder autonomy as dispensable consideration when it conflicted with their assessment of appropriate decisions, particularly regarding housing and financial matters. Dr. Parker recognized the significance of this distinction immediately. Christine, could you respond to that specific aspect of your mother's concern? Not the motivation behind your actions, but the decision to pursue them against her known preferences regarding her home? Christine's response came more quickly this time, suggesting defensive reaction rather than reflective consideration. Every adult child eventually faces difficult decisions about aging parents. Sometimes that means making choices they won't like but are objectively better for their situation. That's not disrespect. It's taking responsibility when emotions are preventing practical decisions. The revealing nature of this statement, positioning my professional judgment as merely emotional attachment, while elevating her assessment to objective rationality despite clear financial self-interest, illustrated the fundamental value disconnect underlying our conflict. Despite weeks of counseling, Christine still framed elder autonomy as dispensable when it conflicted with others. Assessment of appropriate choices, precisely the perspective I had spent my career helping families move beyond. That framing continues to position me as incapable of rational decision-making about my own living situation, I observed, maintaining steady tone despite frustration. My choice to remain in my home isn't emotional irrationality to be overridden by your superior judgment. It's a thoughtful decision based on comprehensive consideration of what matters most to me at this stage of life: community connections, familiar surroundings, independence, and personal meaning that transcends property, Value. Dr. Parker nodded slightly, acknowledging the fundamental issue I had identified. This perspective difference appears central to moving forward. Christine, your mother isn't objecting to your concern for her welfare, but to the assumption that your assessment should override her own judgment about her living preferences. How do you understand that distinction? Christine sat silently for nearly a minute, an unusually extended pause that suggested genuine contemplation rather than merely formulating defense. When she finally spoke, her tone carried unfamiliar hesitancy. I never thought about it quite that way, she admitted slowly. In my counseling practice, I emphasize client autonomy and self-determination constantly. Yet somehow with you... She paused again, seeming to recognize the contradiction for the first time. Somehow with you, I assumed that my professional knowledge and concern gave me authority to make decisions on your behalf, even contrary to your clearly stated preferences. This recognition, however preliminary, represented significant breakthrough in our process, acknowledging the fundamental autonomy violation rather than merely the tactical misrepresentation. Dr. Parker recognized this opening immediately, gently guiding Christine toward deeper examination of this inconsistency between her professional values and personal actions. What do you think might explain that difference in how you approach client autonomy versus your mother's autonomy? She asked. Christine considered this question with evident discomfort before responding with unexpected candor. With clients, there's professional distance and clear boundaries. With Mom, she glanced briefly in my direction before continuing. With Mom, there's complex history and emotions, financial pressures affecting my family, and probably some unexamined assumptions about parent-child relationships that I've never really questioned. This self-reflection, acknowledging the unexamined assumptions underlying her approach, represented meaningful progress beyond the defensive positioning that had characterized previous sessions. While not yet full accountability, it opened pathway toward potential relationship repair through genuine examination of the values disconnect that had enabled their exploitative actions. As our session concluded, Dr. Parker suggested specific reflection work before our next meeting, asking Christine to consider where her assumptions about parent-child decision-making authority originated, and asking me to contemplate what meaningful accountability would look like beyond the legal remedies already established. This balanced assignment acknowledged both the progress made and the significant work still needed for genuine reconciliation. Walking to my car afterward, I experienced familiar mixture of cautious hope and realistic assessment that had characterized my professional approach to family conflicts throughout my career. The session had produced meaningful breakthrough in Christine's acknowledgement of financial motivation and recognition of autonomy issues, yet sustainable relationship repair would require consistent evidence of transformed perspective rather than merely verbal recognition. These counseling sessions, while emotionally demanding, had already yielded unexpected benefits beyond the specific family situation. The insights from navigating my own experience had enhanced my part-time work with the County Elder Rights Coalition, where I had recently increased my volunteer hours, providing consultation to their education and advocacy programs. My personal experience with exploitation disguised as protection had added powerful authenticity to training sessions with financial institutions, healthcare providers, and legal professionals working to recognize and prevent elder financial abuse. 3 weeks after this significant counseling session, Barbara invited me to lunch at the Riverside Cafe that had been our favorite meeting spot throughout my legal case. Her expression as I joined her at the outdoor table suggested news beyond casual social connection. Judge Martinez made her final ruling in the Hernandez case yesterday, she announced after preliminaries. Cited your case specifically in establishing precedent regarding misrepresentation during family deed transfers. Elena Hernandez, a 78-year-old widow whose situation paralleled mine in troubling ways, had been facing similar exploitation attempt by her nephew. Though client confidentiality limited specific details Barbara could share, The general circumstances were distressingly familiar. Deed transfer obtained under false pretenses following health incident, followed by pressure to sell and relocate, against clearly documented preferences. She quoted directly from your settlement acknowledgement language regarding elder autonomy requiring respect for expressed preferences rather than substituted judgment based on others' financial assessments. Barbara continued, the standardized language we developed from your case created judicial framework for addressing these situations that's already protecting others. This information, that my painful personal experience had established protection extending beyond my individual circumstances, provided profound validation of the difficult stand I had taken. Throughout my professional career, I had witnessed how individual cases often created systemic improvements when properly leveraged by committed advocates. That my own situation now served similar purpose brought full circle meaning to the professional principles I had long championed. Elena asked specifically if you might be willing to meet with her, Barbara added. Not for legal consultation, but for personal perspective on rebuilding life after this type of family betrayal. Your experience, navigating both the legal process and the emotional aftermath, represents unique resource for others facing similar situations. This request reflected opportunity I hadn't previously considered, using my combined professional expertise and personal experience to provide direct support to others navigating elder exploitation recovery. While my professional background had equipped me with technical knowledge regarding legal remedies and procedural options, my personal journey had added irreplaceable insight into the emotional aspects of family betrayal and subsequent healing attempts. I'd be honored to meet with her, I responded, genuine purpose replacing the residual sadness that had lingered despite legal victory. Perhaps this experience can serve greater purpose by helping others recognize and respond to similar situations before they escalate to legal necessity. The following week, I met Elena at my home, deliberately choosing this setting rather than impersonal office environment to demonstrate the tangible outcome of successfully resisting displacement pressure. As we shared tea in my sunroom overlooking the garden Thomas and I had established decades earlier, Elena's initial hesitancy gradually yielded to candid conversation about the complex emotions surrounding family exploitation attempts. The hardest part isn't the legal battle, she confided, echoing my own experience. It's reconciling the person you believed your family member to be with their willingness to override your autonomy for financial gain. How do you move forward when that fundamental trust has been broken? This profound question, focusing on relationship damage rather than merely practical outcomes, reflected the deeper challenge that legal remedies alone couldn't address. Drawing from both professional wisdom and personal experience, I shared perspective that had gradually emerged through my own healing process. Complete restoration of previous trust may not be a realistic goal, I acknowledged. What's potentially achievable is new relationship with clear boundaries, transformed expectations, and ongoing evidence of changed values rather than merely verbal assurances. Our conversation continued for nearly 3 hours, covering practical considerations regarding security measures and legal protections, alongside deeper exploration of emotional recovery strategies and realistic relationship expectations. Throughout this exchange, I found unexpected healing in transforming painful experience into practical wisdom that might spare others similar trauma, or at least provide navigation framework when prevention failed. This meeting with Elena catalyzed significant shift in my post-retirement focus, inspiring creation of the Elder Autonomy Support Group I now facilitate monthly at the community center. What began as informal gathering of 5 elders who had experienced exploitation attempts has expanded to regular attendance of 15 to 20 seniors sharing experiences, strategies, and mutual validation regarding autonomy challenges from well-meaning but controlling family members. 6 months after the settlement agreement, Christine requested individual meeting outside our continuing therapy sessions. We arranged to meet at neutral location, the botanical garden where I had often taken her for Sunday outings during her childhood. As we walked through the rose section that had been her favorite, Christine's typically confident demeanor appeared, subdued, suggesting purpose beyond casual reconnection. "I've been doing significant work in therapy beyond our joint sessions," she began after initial pleasantries, "really examining the values and assumptions that led to my actions regarding your home. It's been uncomfortable but necessary process." Listened without immediate response, having learned through professional experience that premature affirmation often short-circuits accountability process that requires full expression before meaningful acknowledgement. "What I've realized," she continued after gathering her thoughts, "is that I've developed a value system that prioritizes financial metrics over human considerations, calculating everything through investment potential, market optimization, and leveraged returns. Somehow along the way, I began applying those frameworks to family decisions where they simply don't belong. This insight, recognizing the category error of applying financial optimization frameworks to relationship contexts, reflected meaningful evolution beyond previous defensive positions. While not excusing the specific actions taken, it provided explanatory context that created potential foundation for relationship repair if accompanied by consistent behavioral evidence of transformed perspective. "Daniel and I are separating," she added after brief silence. "The legal proceedings and therapy process forced examination of fundamental values disconnect that extends far beyond the situation with your home. His primary response to the settlement has been anger about the missed financial opportunity rather than recognition of the trust violation involved. This development, while not entirely surprising given the glimpses of their relationship dynamics revealed during legal proceedings, suggested Christine's values examination extended beyond our specific conflict to broader life assessment. Whether this separation represented temporary reaction or sustainable transformation remained to be seen, but the willingness to examine fundamental values, alignment in her primary relationship, indicated meaningful rather than superficial reflection. Process. "I've also been reconsidering my counseling practice focus," she continued as we paused near the koi pond that had fascinated her as child. "I've applied for additional certification in elder and family counseling, specifically addressing autonomy and transition issues. The irony of my professional focus on client self-determination while failing to respect that same principle with you has prompted significant reconsideration of my practice priorities. These concrete actions, relationship reassessment and professional redirection, suggested transformative reflection rather than merely strategic damage control. Throughout my mediation career, I had learned to distinguish between verbal accountability, unaccompanied by behavioral change, versus genuine transformation, evidence through tangible life adjustments aligned with expressed insights. What matters most to me, Christine said, meeting my gaze directly for perhaps the first time since the legal proceedings, isn't the house or financial aspects, but rebuilding trust I damaged through actions that violated everything you taught me about respecting others' autonomy. I don't expect immediate forgiveness or relationship restoration, but I want you to know I'm committed to demonstrating changed perspective through consistent actions moving forward. This statement, acknowledging the trust violation as primary issue rather than focusing on practical outcomes, addressed the core relational damage previous discussions had often sidestepped. While not erasing the pain of betrayal or guaranteeing relationship restoration, it established potential foundation for gradual rebuilding through demonstrated value alignment rather than merely expected forgiveness without earned trust. Thank you for sharing these reflections, I responded after thoughtful consideration. Rebuilding trust will necessarily be a gradual process, requiring consistent evidence of transformed perspective rather than single conversation. I'm cautiously encouraged by the self-examination you're describing and will remain open to incremental relationship rebuilding as that transformation demonstrates itself through ongoing choices and actions. This measured response, neither rejecting reconciliation possibility nor offering premature closure, reflected the balanced approach I had advocated throughout my professional career when addressing profound trust violations. Meaningful relationship repair. Following exploitation requires sustained evidence of transformed values rather than emotional conversations or temporary behavioral adjustments that revert once forgiveness has been secured. Our continuing therapy sessions over subsequent months provided structured environment for this gradual rebuilding process. Christine's individual work became increasingly evident through consistent accountability without defensive qualification, genuine curiosity about my perspective without expectation of specific responses, and respectful engagement with autonomy, principles previously dismissed as impractical sentimentality. Perhaps most significantly, her approach to my home shifted from viewing it as financial asset, awaiting optimization, to recognizing its profound significance as expression of my identity and connection to lifetime of memories. Rather than continuing to advocate for practical downsizing, she began offering specific support for aging-in-place modifications that respected my determination to remain in my home while addressing legitimate safety considerations that enhanced, rather than restricted, my independence. 1 year after the birthday card that had revealed their exploitation attempt, Christine arranged a small gathering at my home with several close friends who had supported me throughout the difficult legal process. Rather than attempting to minimize or avoid reference to the previous year's events, she addressed them directly with accountability that suggested genuine transformation rather than strategic performance. Last year at this time, I presented Mom with birthday card containing message that disrespected her autonomy and revealed exploitative intentions regarding her home, she acknowledged to the assembled group. That action represented profound violation of trust that required legal intervention and has necessitated difficult but essential examination of values that enabled such behavior. This public accountability, acknowledging wrongdoing without qualification or expectation of immediate forgiveness, represented meaningful evidence of the transformation our therapeutic process had gradually developed. Rather than rushing toward superficial reconciliation or expecting relationship restoration without sustained demonstration of changed perspective, Christine had engaged authentically with the necessary process of earning rebuilding rather than demanding it. The gathering became unexpected celebration not of complete relationship restoration, which remained ongoing process requiring continued evidence of transformed values, but of resilience, appropriate boundary establishment, and the gradual evolution from exploitation to accountability that our therapeutic process had facilitated. The friends who had supported my legal stand witnessed this progress with evident satisfaction, their presence validating both the necessity of the difficult boundaries I had established and the measured openness to relationship rebuilding based on demonstrated transformation rather than convenient forgetting. As guests departed that evening, leaving Christine and me alone in the living room, she presented envelope containing not birthday card, but formal letter on her professional stationery. Unlike the previous year's cruel message, this document contained detailed proposal for establishing legal framework that would permanently protect my housing autonomy while creating transparent communication protocols regarding any legitimate health or safety concerns that might arise in future years. This proposal has been reviewed by both Barbara and your financial advisor, she explained. It establishes irrevocable life estate guaranteeing your continued residence regardless of any future health developments, while creating structured assessment process for addressing legitimate safety concerns through objective third-party evaluation, rather than subjective family judgment. This practical protection, developed with appropriate professional guidance rather than unilateral family determination, represented tangible evidence of transformed approach to elder autonomy issues. Rather than positioning family members as appropriate decision-makers regarding my housing regardless of my preferences, the proposal established objective processes that respected my autonomy while addressing legitimate safety considerations through transparent, professionally guided protocols. This won't immediately restore the trust that was broken, Christine acknowledged with realistic assessment rather than expectation of immediate closure. but I hope it provides concrete evidence of my commitment to ensuring that your housing decisions remain firmly within your control, regardless of any future circumstances that might arise. This practical demonstration, creating legal safeguards against potential future vulnerability, reflected meaningful transformation from the exploitation attempt of the previous year. While relationship repair remained an ongoing process requiring sustained evidence of value alignment, this tangible step toward permanent protection represented significant milestone in the journey from betrayal toward carefully bounded reconciliation. As Christine departed that evening, our goodbye reflected the measured progress our therapeutic process had gradually developed, neither artificially warm, as though betrayal had never occurred, nor coldly distant, as though relationship repair remained impossible. The cautious optimism I felt represented balanced assessment familiar from professional practice, recognition that meaningful transformation appears possible while maintaining realistic expectations regarding the time and consistent evidence required for genuine trust rebuilding. In the quiet of my home that evening, the home I had successfully defended against exploitation attempt, disguised as protective concern, I reflected on the unexpected journey of the past year. The birthday card that had delivered such devastating message had ultimately catalyzed not only successful legal defense of my housing autonomy, but also broader advocacy work protecting other elders facing similar exploitation attempts. The professional expertise developed throughout my career had proven unexpectedly crucial in personal crisis, providing both technical knowledge regarding legal remedies and emotional framework for processing betrayal without allowing bitterness to overshadow potential healing when accompanied by genuine accountability. Most significantly, the autonomy principles I had advocated throughout my professional practice had been personally validated through successful resistance against their violation, demonstrating that age doesn't diminish right to self-determination. That vulnerability requires protection without imposing unnecessary dependence, and that respecting elders means honoring their expressed wishes rather than imposing others' convenience considerations. As 74 approached, I found my life enriched rather than diminished by the difficult journey of the past year. The Elder Autonomy Support Group provided meaningful community service transforming personal pain into collective empowerment, while my enhanced consultation work with the County Elder Rights Coalition allowed professional expertise and personal experience to inform improved protection systems for vulnerable seniors throughout our region. Most personally meaningful, the home that represented 4 decades of memories and independent identity remained my sanctuary, its familiar spaces holding irreplaceable connection to lifetime of experiences that transcended mere property value or financial optimization. Potential. The garden Thomas had established decades earlier continued blooming in seasonal rhythms that connected past, present, and future, intangible reminder that some values cannot be calculated through market metrics or investment return assessments. The betrayal attempt that had begun with birthday card message, "Thanks for the house, now leave," had ultimately strengthened rather than diminished my autonomy, catalyzing not only successful legal defense of my housing rights, but also deeper appreciation for the community connections and professional expertise that had made that victory possible. While family relationship remained work in progress requiring ongoing evidence of transformed values, the broader meaning extracted from difficult experience had created legacy extending far beyond individual circumstances to protect others facing similar vulnerability. Sometimes the most important advocacy involves protecting our own autonomy when others believe they know better than we do what serves our interests. And sometimes, the legacy of such difficult stands extends far beyond individual circumstances to create systemic changes that protect countless others from similar harm, transforming personal victory into community benefit, aligned with the deepest values that have guided a lifetime of principled independence. 2 years after the fateful birthday card that had attempted to uproot my life, I stood at the podium in the county courthouse's main conference room, facing an audience of over 100 professionals gathered for the inaugural Elder Rights Protection Conference. Judges, attorneys, healthcare providers, financial advisors, and social workers filled the rows of seats, their attentive expressions reflecting the growing recognition of elder exploitation as serious concern requiring coordinated professional response. When I received that birthday card instructing me to leave my home of 40 years, I began, my voice steady despite the emotional weight of sharing this personal story in professional context. I experienced not just betrayal by family I trusted, but confrontation with pervasive societal assumptions about aging and autonomy that enable such exploitation to occur. The conference, developed collaboratively by the County Elder Rights Coalition, the Bar Association's Elder Law Committee, and the newly established Center for Elder Autonomy at State University, represented systemic response to the issues my individual case had highlighted. Barbara sat in the front row beside Judge Eleanor Blackwell, both having played instrumental roles in transforming my personal experience into broader professional education initiative. As family law mediator, for nearly 4 decades I understood the legal remedies available, I continued. But what many vulnerable elders lack is not just knowledge of their rights, but the emotional fortitude to assert those rights against family members who genuinely believe they're acting in the elder's best interest while simultaneously serving their own financial interests. This core challenge, helping elders recognize and resist exploitation disguised as protection, had become central focus of my advocacy work since successfully defending my own housing rights. The Elder Autonomy Support Group had expanded to 4 locations throughout the county, while the Recognizing Exploitation Patterns training program I had developed with Barbara had been implemented in 15 financial institutions, significantly increasing early intervention in suspicious transactions involving senior accounts. The most insidious aspect of elder exploitation is how frequently it arrives wrapped in language of concern and protection, I explained to the assembled professionals. The birthday card message, "Thanks for the house, now leave," was jarring in its naked entitlement. But many exploitation attempts present more subtly as, "We're just worried about you living alone," or "This arrangement would give us peace of mind," while obscuring the underlying transfer of assets or authority. Throughout the audience, I noted healthcare professionals nodding in particular recognition of this pattern, having witnessed countless family conversations where protection narratives masked control dynamics that prioritized others' convenience over elder preferences. This recognition across professional disciplines represented significant progress from the fragmented approach that had previously allowed exploitation to continue unaddressed when presenting as benevolent concern. The legal remedies secured, in my case, established important precedent regarding misrepresentation during deed transfers, I acknowledged, gesturing toward Barbara and Judge Blackwell. But equally important is the preventative work of recognizing vulnerability patterns before crisis points necessitate legal intervention. Following my presentation, the conference broke into specialized workshop sessions, financial professionals discussing transaction monitoring protocols, healthcare providers addressing capacity assessment standards, legal experts examining guardianship reform initiatives, and social workers developing resource coordination systems. This comprehensive approach reflected the understanding that elder exploitation requires multidisciplinary response rather than isolated interventions within separate professional silos. During the networking lunch, I found myself approached by Dr. James Richardson, the newly appointed Director of Geriatric Medicine at County Hospital. "Your workshop materials on recognizing the difference between legitimate safety concerns and controlling behaviors disguised as protection have transformed our discharge planning process," he shared. "We've implemented the decision tree model you developed, and it's already preventing inappropriate institutionalization when home-based supports would better serve patient preferences." This practical application, medical professionals using assessment tools developed from my experience to protect other elders' housing autonomy, provided profound validation of my advocacy work. Throughout my professional career, I had witnessed how individual cases could catalyze systemic improvements when properly translated into practical tools accessible to frontline providers making critical intervention decisions. As the conference concluded with panel discussion on coordinated community response strategies, Judge Blackwell made an announcement that reflected how dramatically the professional landscape had evolved since my individual case 2 years earlier. The state Supreme Court has approved the formation of specialized elder protection courts in each judicial district, she reported to appreciative murmurs throughout the audience. These dedicated dockets will ensure consistent application of elder protection statutes with judges specifically trained in autonomy preservation principles, alongside necessary safety interventions. This institutional development, creating specialized court response to the issues my case had highlighted, represented structural change extending far beyond individual victory to systematic protection for similarly vulnerable elders. What had begun as personal struggle to retain my home against exploitation attempt had catalyzed professional transformation that would protect countless others facing similar vulnerability in years to come. As attendees gathered their materials at the conference conclusion, Christine approached from the back of the room where she had quietly observed the proceedings. Her presence reflected the complex evolution of our relationship over the past 2 years, neither complete reconciliation nor permanent estrangement, but carefully bounded engagement based on demonstrated accountability rather than presumed trust. Your presentation was powerful, she offered with genuine respect, rather than the patronizing tone that had characterized her approach before the legal proceedings. The distinction you drew between supporting autonomy versus substituting judgment was particularly meaningful given our history. Christine's professional evolution had paralleled our relationship rebuilding process in significant ways. After completing the specialized certification in elder counseling she had mentioned during our garden conversation, she had established practice focused specifically on helping families navigate transitions with respect for elder autonomy rather than control-oriented interventions. Her professional materials explicitly acknowledged learning from personal mistakes regarding autonomy, violations, using her own transformation to create meaningful guidance for others navigating similar family dynamics. I recommended several of my client families attend today, she continued. They're struggling with the balance between legitimate safety concerns and respecting parents' housing preferences. Hearing your perspective, particularly the emphasis on modification support rather than relocation pressure, provides framework they haven't encountered in traditional advice about managing aging parents. This reference to managing elders highlighted precisely the problematic framing I had confronted both personally and professionally. The positioning of aging individuals as problems to be managed rather than autonomous persons whose preferences deserve primary consideration in decisions affecting their lives. Christine's recognition of this fundamental reframing represented significant evolution from her previous approach to my housing situation. Our relationship had developed careful boundaries that respected both the betrayal history and the genuine accountability work Christine had demonstrated over sustained period. Monthly dinners provided structured engagement opportunity without presuming complete restoration of previous trust, while her consistent respect for my housing autonomy had gradually rebuilt limited foundation for family connection without expecting erasure of past violations. Most significantly, Christine had followed through on the formal legal protections proposed on the first anniversary of the birthday card incident. Working with Barbara, she had established irrevocable life estate guaranteeing my continued residence, regardless of any future health developments, while creating objective third-party assessment protocols for addressing legitimate safety concerns without substituting family judgment for my expressed preferences. These concrete protections, coupled with consistent behavioral evidence of transformed perspective, had enabled cautious rebuilding of relationship that honored both the serious violation that had occurred and the meaningful accountability work that had followed. While certain trust aspects remained permanently altered by the exploitation attempt, Christine's sustained demonstration of changed values had created possibility for connection that neither minimized past betrayal nor precluded potential healing, through consistent respect moving forward. As we walked together toward the parking area following the conference, Christine mentioned development that reflected her continuing personal growth alongside professional evolution. "I've been asked to contribute chapter to textbook on elder autonomy in family counseling contexts," she shared. "I'm addressing specifically how practitioners can help family members examine unacknowledged financial motivations that often underlie control behaviors presented as protection." This academic contribution, directly addressing the dynamics that had characterized her own exploitative actions, represented meaningful transformation of painful experience into professional wisdom that might prevent similar violations by helping practitioners recognize and address the often unacknowledged financial factors driving family pressure regarding elder housing decisions. They've asked me to incorporate case example addressing how financial pressures can distort family judgment even among those who consider themselves ethically grounded, she continued with evident self-awareness. "I'll be using anonymized version of our situation, with your permission, to illustrate how easily protection narratives can mask self-interest when financial stressors create pressure to view family property as potential solution to unrelated problems." This willingness to transform personal mistake into educational example reflected genuine integration of the accountability process, rather than compartmentalized experience to be minimized or concealed. Throughout my professional career, I had observed how the most meaningful growth often emerged from willingness to acknowledge mistakes transparently, rather than defensively managing damaged reputation through strategic silence. "I think that contribution could be valuable," I responded after thoughtful consideration, "particularly in helping practitioners identify the patterns before they escalate to legal necessity." This measured support, acknowledging potential value without effusive praise, suggesting complete relationship restoration, reflected the balanced engagement we had gradually established through consistent evidence of transformed perspective, rather than premature forgiveness without sustained accountability. 3 months after the conference, my 75th birthday arrived with quiet celebration different in every respect from the devastating card delivery 2 years earlier. Rather than gathering at my home, close friends had arranged dinner at my favorite riverside restaurant, creating joyful occasion focused on my continued community engagement and advocacy impact, rather than dwelling on the painful anniversary. The date also represented. Christine's participation in this celebration reflected the carefully calibrated relationship we had established, present as family member, demonstrating continued accountability work rather than presuming complete restoration of previous trust. The simple card she presented contained handwritten message of appreciation for my wisdom, resilience, and willingness to establish necessary boundaries while remaining open to demonstrated growth, rather than generic birthday sentiments or implicit expectations of relationship normalization. Most meaningfully, the card included formal notification that the Elder Autonomy Education Fund we had established together had received its first major institutional grant, $150,000 from the Regional Community Foundation to expand the training programs I had developed for financial institutions, healthcare providers, and legal professionals throughout the state. This fund, created through Christine's significant personal contribution alongside my professional guidance, represented transformation of our painful experience into educational resource that would help prevent similar exploitation attempts. Through enhanced professional recognition of warning patterns. The grant announcement provided perfect segue into news I had been considering sharing at this gathering: my decision to accept visiting faculty position at State University's Center for Elder Autonomy for the upcoming academic year. This opportunity to incorporate my combined professional expertise and personal experience into formal educational curriculum represented meaningful evolution of my advocacy work from community-based training to institutional knowledge development that would influence professional practice standards for decades to come. This position allows me to help shape how future professionals across disciplines understand elder autonomy issues, I explained to the gathered friends who had supported my journey from exploitation victim to recognized advocacy leader. The curriculum we're developing integrates legal frameworks with practical identification tools and intervention strategies that address exploitation attempts before they necessitate court proceedings. This educational role, translating personal and professional experience into formal knowledge transmission, represented perfect culmination of the journey that had begun with birthday card message attempting to dismiss my autonomy and preferences. What had been intended as exploitation had instead catalyzed powerful advocacy voice that now influenced professional standards, institutional practices, and educational foundations, preparing the next generation of practitioners across disciplines. 2. Weeks after this birthday celebration, I received unexpected letter from Daniel, the first direct communication since the legal proceedings had concluded 2 years earlier. The carefully composed message, delivered through Barbara rather than sent directly, contained neither specific apology nor relationship overture, but rather information he believed I deserved to know given the significant impact of past events. Following our separation and divorce proceedings, he wrote in formal language quite different from the dismissive tone he had employed during the exploitation attempt. I've been required to complete financial counseling and ethics training as condition of maintaining my real estate license after disciplinary review of my actions regarding your property. This professional consequence, formal ethics violation finding requiring remedial intervention, represented appropriate accountability within his professional context. The regulatory body's recognition that attempted exploitation of family property rights reflected concerning ethical judgment regarding professional responsibilities demonstrated important connection between personal actions and professional standards, often overlooked in exploitation cases. The required education program, Daniel continued, included case studies regarding elder financial exploitation that have forced uncomfortable recognition of how my financial pressures influenced actions I rationalized as family protection concerns. While this acknowledgement doesn't undo the violation of trust that occurred, I believe you deserve to know that regulatory accountability has prompted genuine reconsideration of the assumptions that enabled those actions. This limited accountability, acknowledging harmful actions without expecting relationship restoration, reflected appropriate boundaries given the role he had played in the exploitation attempt and the absence of sustained evidence of transformed perspective that Christine had demonstrated through consistent actions over extended time. The professional consequences he described represented systemic accountability, functioning as designed, creating both specific deterrence through personal consequences and general deterrence through professional community awareness of exploitations. Potential impact on licensure status. As I shared this development with Barbara during our monthly lunch meeting, she offered perspective that captured the multi-layered outcomes of my decision to fight the exploitation attempt rather than acquiescing to family pressure despite the emotional difficulty that resistance had entailed. Your case has created ripple effects throughout multiple systems, she observed thoughtfully. Legal precedent protecting others facing similar exploitation, professional training enhancing early intervention capacity, educational curriculum, developing future practitioners' awareness, regulatory accountability, reinforcing ethical standards, and perhaps most importantly, public recognition that age doesn't diminish fundamental rights to self-determination regarding one's living environment. This systemic impact, transforming individual injustice into multi-level protections for similarly vulnerable individuals, represented the most meaningful outcome of the difficult journey initiated by that devastating birthday card. Throughout my professional career, I had witnessed how individual courage in confronting injustice often catalyzed broader changes when personal experience translated into systemic advocacy with appropriate professional guidance and institutional support. 1. Afternoon following my weekly Elder Autonomy Support Group session, Elena Hernandez, whose similar exploitation case had been among the first to benefit from the legal precedent established through my situation, approached with news reflecting the expanding impact of our shared advocacy work. The Spanish language. Materials you helped develop have been adopted by senior centers throughout the Latino community, she reported with evident satisfaction. Our cultural reluctance to publicly challenge family authority often prevents seniors from questioning exploitation disguised as traditional respect, but having these resources in appropriate language and cultural context is opening crucial conversations previously considered taboo. This cultural adaptation, extending protection frameworks to communities with different family authority traditions, represented important evolution of the advocacy work sparked by my individual case. The collaboration with Elena and other culturally diverse elders had enhanced the original frameworks developed from my experience, creating more universally applicable resources that respected cultural differences while maintaining core autonomy, protection principles. As my 75th year progressed, the visiting faculty position at the Center for Elder Autonomy provided platform for integrating these diverse perspectives into formal educational curriculum that would shape professional practice standards across disciplines. Working with multidisciplinary team including legal experts, healthcare providers, financial professionals, and social workers, we developed comprehensive training programs that addressed exploitation prevention from complementary perspectives rather than isolated professional silos. Central to this curriculum was distinction between legitimate safety interventions that support autonomous functioning versus controlling interventions that substitute others' judgment for elder preferences, regardless of demonstrated capacity. This fundamental reframing, moving from protection through control to protection through supported autonomy, represented paradigm shift that had emerged directly from my personal experience navigating exploitation disguised as family protection. The academic position also provided opportunity to contribute to policy development at state legislative level, where Elder Justice Task Force was developing comprehensive statutory reforms addressing financial exploitation, misuse of legal instruments, and enhanced accountability for fiduciary violations in family contexts. Testifying before the Legislative Committee considering these reforms, I shared personal experience alongside professional analysis, providing compelling illustration of how appropriately structured legal protections can preserve autonomy while addressing legitimate vulnerability concerns. The birthday card instructing me to leave my home revealed exploitation attempt that legal intervention successfully remedied, I explained to the assembled legislators. But comprehensive protection requires more than individual legal victories. It necessitates coordinated systems recognizing exploitation patterns before crisis points require court proceedings. The resulting legislation, passed with bipartisan support reflecting growing recognition of elder protection as nonpartisan concern, incorporated key elements developed directly from my case experience. Enhanced verification requirements for deed transfers involving seniors, expanded fiduciary responsibility standards for family members acting under legal instruments, expedited hearing procedures for autonomy protection petitions, and mandatory consideration of least restrictive alternatives before approving any interventions limiting elder independence. These statutory protections, extending far beyond my individual case to create systematic safeguards for all seniors throughout the state, represented perhaps the most significant legacy of the difficult stand against exploitation I had taken, rather than surrendering my home to family pressure, despite emotional cost that resistance had entailed. What had begun as personal trauma had transformed through persistent advocacy into structural protection that would benefit countless vulnerable elders for generations to come. On quiet evenings in my beloved Craftsman bungalow, the home I had successfully fought to protect against exploitation disguised as family concern, I often reflected on the unexpected journey initiated by that devastating birthday card 3 years earlier. The garden Thomas had established decades earlier continued flourishing through seasonal cycles, the roses along the front walkway blooming with particular vibrancy following renovation work Christine had helped arrange as part of her sustained accountability actions. The house itself remained central to my identity and independence, its familiar spaces holding irreplaceable memories while accommodating thoughtful modifications that enhanced safety without sacrificing autonomy. Precisely the balanced approach to aging in place that my advocacy work promoted as alternative to the unnecessary displacement pressure many seniors faced from well-meaning but controlling family members. Most meaningfully, the home that exploitation attempt had targeted had become gathering place for the Elder Autonomy Leadership Team, the dedicated group of seniors who had transformed personal exploitation experiences into collective advocacy force influencing professional practices, institutional policies, and legislative frameworks throughout the region. Our monthly strategy sessions around my dining room table represented powerful reclamation of space that betrayal had attempted to take, transforming site of exploitation attempt into headquarters for movement preventing similar violations for countless other vulnerable elders. As autumn leaves fell gently in my garden, I completed final revisions on the manuscript that represented comprehensive integration of my professional expertise and personal experience. Beyond protection, elder, autonomy and supported decision-making in family contexts. This book, accepted by the University Press for publication in their Professional Practice series, synthesized the frameworks, assessment tools, and intervention strategies developed through 3 years of intensive advocacy work following my own exploitation experience. The dedication page reflected both the painful catalyst and meaningful transformation that had characterized this unexpected life chapter. For those whose autonomy has been challenged by those claiming to protect them, may your boundaries be respected, your voices heard, and your right to self-determination recognized regardless of age or vulnerability. And for those professionals supporting elders through complex transitions, may you find balance between necessary protection and fundamental respect for expressed preferences, even when they differ from choices you might make. This balanced perspective, acknowledging both vulnerability realities requiring appropriate supports and autonomy rights, preventing unnecessary control, represented the core wisdom extracted from painful personal experience, transformed through professional knowledge into practical guidance for others navigating similar terrain. The manuscript's final chapter, titled When Protection Becomes Control, Recognizing and Responding to Exploitation Disguised as Care, directly addressed the dynamics that had characterized my own situation while providing practical response, frameworks for both vulnerable elders and the professionals supporting them. The concluding paragraph captured the essential message emerging from 3 years of intensive advocacy work, catalyzed by exploitation attempt, that had begun with birthday card message attempting to dismiss my autonomy and preferences. Protection without control requires fundamental respect for the dignity of risk inherent in autonomous decision-making throughout the lifespan. Supporting elder independence means honoring expressed preferences even when they differ from choices others might make, providing necessary assistance that enhances rather than diminishes self-determination, and recognizing that meaningful safety includes emotional security found in familiar surroundings and established community connections. Most importantly, it requires rejecting the ageist assumption that chronological age somehow diminishes the fundamental human right to determine one's own living environment according to personal values rather than others' convenience considerations or financial calculations. This wisdom, emerging directly from exploitation experience, transformed through professional knowledge into practical guidance, represented lasting legacy extending far beyond my individual victory in retaining my beloved home. The birthday card that had delivered such devastating message had ultimately catalyzed advocacy journey, transforming personal trauma into systemic protection, benefiting countless vulnerable elders through enhanced professional practices, institutional policies, and legislative frameworks preserving autonomy rights, regardless of age or vulnerability. Sometimes the most important stands we take involve protecting fundamental rights against those claiming to act in our best interests while advancing their own agendas. Sometimes apparent defeat, receiving birthday card instructing me to leave, my home of 40 years, becomes catalyst for unexpected victory extending far beyond individual circumstances to create lasting protections for all facing similar vulnerability. And sometimes, the wisdom extracted from painful personal experience becomes most meaningful legacy, transforming private trauma into public advocacy that preserves essential human dignity through unwavering defense of autonomy regardless of age, vulnerability, or others' assessment of appropriate choices. As 75 yielded to 76, I found profound peace in this unexpected resolution. My home secured against exploitation attempt, my professional expertise enhanced, through personal experience, and most significantly, my individual stand against autonomy violation transformed into systemic protection, extending to countless vulnerable elders who would never know my name, but would benefit from safeguards catalyzed by my refusal to surrender home and independence. To those who believed their judgment should override my clearly expressed wishes regarding where and how I would live my remaining years. The birthday card message. Thanks for the house, now leave had failed in its immediate objective, yet succeeded beyond imagination in its unintended consequences. Catalyzing advocacy movement, professional transformation, and legislative reform that would protect elder autonomy rights for generations to come. What had begun as cruel dismissal had ultimately strengthened rather than diminished my voice, creating lasting legacy of protection extending far beyond individual victory to systematic change, honoring the fundamental human right to self-determination, regardless of age or vulnerability. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.